Marco Polo, the Venetian merchant. Welcome, dear listener, and welcome to the first chapter of our journey through the lives of history's most courageous explorers. Tonight, we step into a world of adventure and discovery, a time when the unknown stretched like a vast ocean before the brave souls who dared to chart its depths. Our story begins in the bustling city of Venice, where the air is thick with the scent of salt and spice, and the canals hum with the chatter of merchants and sailors. Here in the heart of the 13th century, a young man named Marco Polo prepares to embark on a journey that will change the world. So settle in, close your eyes, and let the whispers of history carry you back to a time of wonder and peril, a city of dreams and dangers. Imagine the Venice of 1271, a city of shimmering canals and grand palazzos where the wealth of the world flows through its markets. The Polo family, merchants by trade, are no strangers to the risks and rewards of the sea. Marco, just 17 years old, stands on the docks, his heart pounding with excitement and trepidation. His father, Niccolo, and his uncle, Maffeo, have returned from a journey to the distant east, their tales of a land called Cathay, a place of silk, spice, and a mighty ruler named Kublai Khan, filling Marco's dreams. Now they prepare to return, and Marco will join them, his eyes wide with the promise of adventure. But the journey ahead is no simple voyage. The road to Cathay is fraught with danger. Bandits lurk in the mountain passes, deserts stretch like endless seas, and the sea itself is a treacherous beast. Yet Marco is undeterred. He is a young man with a curious mind and a heart hungry for the unknown. With a final glance at the city he loves, he boards the ship, his destiny calling from beyond the horizon, across the Silk Road. The journey to Cathay is a test of endurance and will. The Polos travel by sea to the shores of Asia Minor, then join a caravan bound for the east. The Silk Road, a network of ancient trade routes, stretches before them like a ribbon of dust and dreams. They traverse the rugged mountains of Persia, their breath frosting in the thin air, and cross the endless sands of the Gobi Desert, where the sun beats down like a hammer and the nights are cold as ice. Along the way, Marco's eyes are opened to the wonders of the world. He marvels at the bustling markets of Baghdad, where merchants haggle over silks and spices, and the towering minarets of Samarkand, their tiles gleaming in the sun. He learns the languages of the lands they pass through, his tongue twisting around unfamiliar words, his mind a sponge for knowledge. But the journey is not without peril. Bandits raid their caravan, their swords flashing in the moonlight, and Marco learns the sting of fear and the rush of survival. The court of Kublai Khan. After years on the road, the Polos finally reach the court of Kublai Khan, the mighty ruler of the Mongol Empire. The Khan's palace is a marvel of opulence, its halls adorned with gold and jade, its gardens a paradise of fountains and flowers. Marco, now a young man of 21, stands before the Khan, his heart pounding with awe and trepidation. The Khan, a man of immense power and wisdom, takes a liking to the young Venetian, impressed by his curiosity and intellect. For the next 17 years, Marco serves the Khan, traveling across the vast empire on missions of diplomacy and trade. He ventures to the far reaches of China, where the Great Wall snakes like a dragon across the hills, and to the lush jungles of Southeast Asia, where the air is thick with the scent of spice. He learns the customs of the people, their languages and beliefs, his mind a treasure trove of knowledge. But what stories did he bring back from these distant lands? And how did they shape the world he left behind? The return to Venice. In 1292, after nearly 2 decades in the East, Marco Polo and his family begin the long journey home. They sail across the Indian Ocean, their ships laden with treasures, silks, spices, and tales of wonder. The return is no less perilous, with storms and pirates testing their resolve. But Marco is a changed man, his eyes filled with the light of distant lands, his heart heavy with the weight of memory. When they finally reach Venice in 1295, the city is a shadow of the one they left. The Polos are greeted with skepticism, their tales of Cathay dismissed as fantasy. But Marco is undeterred. He knows the truth of what he has seen, and he is determined to share it with the world. Captured during a war with Genoa, he finds himself in prison, where he meets a writer named Rustichello. Together, they craft a book that will become a sensation, The Travels of Marco Polo. It is a tome filled with marvels, tales of paper money, burning rocks, and a land where the sun never sets. But how did this book change the course of history? And what legacy did Marco Polo leave for the explorers who followed? Christopher Columbus, The Voyage That Changed the World. In the late 15th century, Europe buzzed with a restless energy. The Renaissance had awakened a hunger for knowledge, wealth, and adventure. The old trade routes to Asia, once thriving with the clatter of caravans carrying silk, spices, and precious gems, had crumbled after the fall of Constantinople in 1453. The eyes of merchants and monarchs turned westward, toward the mysterious expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. It was into this world of ambition and uncertainty that Christopher Columbus, a sailor from Genoa, stepped forward with a bold and revolutionary idea to reach the East by sailing west. Early life and a dream ignited. Born in 1451 in the bustling port city of Genoa, Italy, Columbus grew up where the sea was both a livelihood and a siren's call. The son of a wool weaver, he might have followed a quieter path, but the rhythm of the waves and the tales of distant lands pulled him toward a life of exploration. As a young man, he sailed the Mediterranean, visiting the sunlit islands of the Aegean and the rugged shores of West Africa. These early voyages sharpened his skills as a navigator and planted the seeds of a grand vision. Columbus was a voracious reader, and it was the works of ancient scholars like Ptolemy that set his mind ablaze. Ptolemy argued that the earth was a sphere and that Asia lay within reach by sailing west across the Atlantic. To most, this was a fanciful notion, but to Columbus, it was a destiny waiting to be claimed. He calculated, some say miscalculated, the distance to Asia, convinced it was far shorter than others believed. This unwavering belief would drive him through years of rejection and hardship. The quest for a patron. Turning his dream into reality required more than conviction. It demanded resources. Columbus spent nearly a decade pitching his plan to Europe's rulers. He approached the courts of Portugal, England, and France, his maps and charts in hand, only to face dismissal time and again. The risks were too great, the costs too steep, the idea too wild. Portugal, a maritime powerhouse, turned him away, favoring their own route around Africa's Cape of Good Hope. Undeterred, Columbus pressed on. In 1492, his persistence paid off when he won the support of Queen Isabella of Castile and King Ferdinand of Aragon, the monarchs of a newly unified Spain. They saw in Columbus a chance to outpace their rivals and claim new territories for God and gold. With their blessing and a modest fleet of 3 ships, the Nana, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, Columbus set sail from Palos de la Frontera on August 3rd, 1492, into the unknown. The voyage was a test of endurance and faith. As the ships plunged deeper into uncharted waters, the crew's unease grew. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, a void of blue broken only by the occasional leap of a fish or the shadow of a storm. Weeks turned into months, and whispers of mutiny spread like wildfire. The men spoke of sea monsters, of falling off the edge of a flat earth. Columbus, steadfast and resolute, quelled their fears with promises of land and riches just beyond the horizon. Then, on October 12th, 1492, a cry shattered the tension. Land! A sailor aboard the Pinta had spotted a speck on the horizon, an island in what is now the Bahamas. Columbus named it San Salvador, though its exact location remains a mystery. Stepping ashore, he planted Spain's flag and declared the land a discovery for his patrons. He believed he had reached the outer edges of Asia, perhaps Japan or the Spice Islands. In truth, he had stumbled upon a continent unknown to Europe, the Americas. First encounters and unseen consequences. Columbus's first meeting with the indigenous Taino people was a blend of wonder and miscommunication. He described them as gentle and generous, offering gifts of parrots and cotton. Yet beneath this curiosity lay a hunger for gold. Convinced that these islands held untold wealth, Columbus began a relentless search for treasure. His men took captives, demanding tribute, and what began as an exchange of trinkets soon spiraled into exploitation. This initial encounter foreshadowed a darker legacy. Columbus's arrival marked the beginning of a collision between worlds, one that would bring riches to Europe, but devastation to the America's native peoples. Diseases like smallpox, carried unknowingly by the explorers, would soon decimate populations with no immunity. The quest for gold and glory would give way to colonization and enslavement. 3 more voyages. Over the next decade, Columbus embarked on 3 additional expeditions, each a chapter of discovery and struggle. His second voyage in 1493 brought a larger fleet and settlers to establish colonies on Hispaniola. The third, in 1498, saw him explore the coast of South America, while the fourth, in 1502, took him along Central America's shores. He mapped islands like Cuba and Jamaica, battled shipwrecks and storms, and faced growing resistance from both natives and his own disillusioned crews. Yet Columbus's later years were shadowed by failure. Accused of tyranny and mismanagement as governor of the colonies, he was arrested in 1500 and returned to Spain in chains. Stripped of his titles, he spent his final days defending his achievements. "I have opened a new world," he insisted, a claim both triumphant and tragic, the Columbian Exchange, and a lasting legacy. Columbus's voyages ignited the Columbian Exchange, a global swap of crops, animals, and ideas. Potatoes, tomatoes, and maize flowed to Europe, while horses, cattle, and wheat crossed to the Americas. This exchange reshaped diets and economies, knitting the world closer together. But it also carried a heavy toll. Disease, warfare, and slavery ravaged indigenous societies, leaving scars that endure centuries later. Today, Columbus's legacy is a tapestry of light and shadow. He is hailed as a visionary who expanded humanity's horizons, yet condemned as a harbinger of conquest. His story challenges us to weigh the cost of discovery against its rewards, to see history not as a simple tale of heroes, but as a complex interplay of ambition, courage, and consequence. A horizon reimagined. Picture the scene. The sun dips low, painting the Atlantic gold. Columbus stands on the deck of the Santa Maria, gazing westward, his mind alight with dreams of Asia. He could not have known the forces he would unleash, the empires that would rise, the lives that would be lost, the world that would be remade. His journey was not just a crossing of oceans, but a bridge between eras, a spark that lit the age of exploration. The story of Christopher Columbus is a call to wonder and a cautionary tale. It reminds us that the pursuit of the unknown can lead to marvels and missteps alike. As we trace his path across the waves, we are left to ponder what new worlds await us and what will we leave in our wake. Vasco da Gama, the epic voyage that changed the world. In the late 15th century, Europe stood on the cusp of transformation. The age of exploration had ignited a fervor for discovery, driven by the promise of untold riches from distant lands. Portugal, a small kingdom perched on the Atlantic's edge, emerged as a titan in this grand pursuit. Under King Manuel I, the nation set its sights on a daring goal: to bypass the overland trade routes controlled by rival powers and establish a direct maritime path to the spices and silks of Asia. Into this ambitious vision stepped Vasco da Gama, a man whose name would soon echo across continents. Born around 1469 in Sines, a rugged fishing town along Portugal's coast, da Gama grew up with salt air in his lungs and the sea in his blood. His father, a minor noble, had served the crown, and young Vasco inherited both his tenacity and a knack for navigation. By his 30s, he was a seasoned mariner, hardened by years of coastal voyages and skirmishes against Castilian foes. When King Manuel tapped him in 1497 to lead an expedition to India, da Gama was ready, not just to sail, but to conquer the unknown. A fleet forged for destiny. On July the 8th, 1497, Lisbon's waterfront buzzed with energy. 4 ships gleamed in the morning sun. The São Gabriel, da Gama's flagship, robust and resolute. The São Rafael, helmed by his brother Polo, its hull a twin to the flagship. The swift caravel Berrio, built to dance with the wind, and a humble supply ship, groaning under barrels of provisions. A crew of 170 souls, sailors, soldiers, priests, even a few pardoned convicts, stood ready, their fates tied to da Gama's command. The preparations were meticulous. The holds brimmed with salted cod, hardtack, and wine, while cannons bristled along the decks, a grim promise of defense against pirates or hostile shores. Da Gama pored over charts and checked the astrolabes himself, knowing that precision could mean the difference between triumph and oblivion. As the fleet slipped down the Tagus River, sails unfurling like banners of hope, the crowd on shore cheered. Ahead lay a journey no European had completed, a voyage to India by sea, the Atlantic's unforgiving embrace. The first months were a trial by water and will. Hugging Africa's western coast, the fleet wrestled with currents that tugged like invisible hands and a sun that scorched the decks. Scurvy crept in, a silent menace as fresh fruit vanished and the men's strength waned. Da Gama, His jaw set, made a bold call. He veered west into the open Atlantic, carving a wide loop to catch favorable winds. It was a gamble that stretched their endurance to the breaking point. For 95 days, they saw nothing but waves. The crew grumbled, their faith fraying with each creak of the timbers. Then, on November 7th, 1497, land rose from the mist. St. Helena Bay, a rugged outpost near Africa's southern tip. They staggered ashore, gulping fresh water and bartering with the Khoikhoi people. But a trade gone sour turned violent. An arrow grazed Da Gama's leg, a stinging lesson in the fragility of first encounters. Still, they pressed on, their eyes fixed southward. Rounding the Cape of Good Hope. The Cape of Good Hope loomed next, a beast of rock and sea known to devour ships whole. Its storms were legendary, winds shrieking through the cliffs as waves towered like walls. Da Gama stood firm at the São Gabriel's helm, barking orders as the fleet plunged into the chaos. Rain blinded them, the ships pitched wildly, and for days survival hung by a thread. On November 22nd, the skies cleared. They had rounded the Cape, the gateway to the east now behind them. The crew named a bay, Angra dos Vaqueiros, for the cattle grazing its shores, a fleeting moment of peace before the next leg. Da Gama allowed a brief respite, but his mind was already racing ahead. The eastern coast of Africa awaited, a patchwork of kingdoms and currents that would test their diplomacy as much as their seamanship. Encounters on the Swahili coast. Sailing north, the air grew thick with the sense of spice and salt. In Mozambique, they anchored amid a world of dhows and minarets, the first Europeans to touch this shore. The local sultan eyed them with suspicion, his welcome laced with caution. Da Gama, cloaking himself as a Muslim trader, secured supplies and a pilot, his instincts sharp despite the language barrier. Tensions simmered, but they sailed on. Malindi offered a brighter reception. Its ruler, eager to outshine his rival in Mombasa, greeted Da Gama with gifts and guides. The crew marveled at the city's wealth, markets overflowing with ivory and cloth, ships crisscrossing the Indian Ocean. With a skilled pilot aboard and the monsoon winds rising, they turned east, the subcontinent of India now within reach. Triumph in Calicut. On May 20th, 1498, after 10 months at sea, the cry of land rang out. Calicut sprawled before them, a jewel of India's Malabar coast. Its streets pulsed with life. Merchants weighed pepper in heaps, on temples shimmered gold, and the air hung heavy with cinnamon. Da Gama stepped onto the beach, the first European to link east and west by sea. His heart must have pounded with pride and exhaustion. The Zamorin of Calicut granted an audience, his throne room a spectacle of silk and power. Da Gama offered gifts, cloth and beads, that drew polite smiles but little awe. The Zamorin wanted gold. The Arab traders, sensing a rival, stoked his doubts. Negotiations teetered, yet Da Gama held his ground, securing a modest cargo of spices. It was a foothold, not a conquest, but it was enough. The costly return. In August 1498, the fleet turned homeward, its holds fragrant with pepper and cloves. The journey back was merciless. Storms sank the São Rafael, and scurvy claimed lives by the dozen. When Lisbon's harbor came into view in September 1499, only 55 men remained, yet the city roared with joy. King Manuel showered Da Gama with titles, Admiral of the Seas, and the spices fetched a fortune, dwarfing the expedition's cost. a legacy cast in waves. Da Gama's voyage was more than a journey, it was a rupture in history. Portugal surged into Asia, its ships soon a common sight in Indian ports. The sea route he pioneered shifted trade, toppled monopolies, and fueled Europe's rise. Yet it also sowed seeds of conflict, cultural clashes, and colonial ambitions that would unfold over centuries. As dusk fell over Lisbon, Da Gama stood as a hero, his eyes tracing the horizon he'd tamed. But the ocean, vast and restless, whispered of more to come. His story was just the beginning. Ferdinand Magellan, the captain who defied the world. In the twilight of the 15th century, Europe was a continent ablaze with the spirit of discovery. The Renaissance had awakened a thirst for knowledge and wealth, while the fall of Constantinople had severed the old trade routes to the east. The great powers of the age, Portugal and Spain, turned their gaze to the sea, seeking new paths to the riches of Asia. It was in this era of ambition and adventure that Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese navigator, emerged as a figure of destiny. His name would become synonymous with courage, exploration, and the relentless pursuit of the unknown. But how did a man, born into obscurity, come to lead the first expedition to circumnavigate the globe? And what drove him to risk everything in the face of insurmountable odds? A son of Portugal. Ferdinand Magellan was born around 1480 in the rugged hills of northern Portugal, the son of minor nobility. His early years were spent in the service of the Portuguese court, where he learned the arts of seamanship and navigation. At the age of 25, he joined the armada of Francisco de Almeida, sailing to India and the Spice Islands. There, he witnessed the wealth of the East, the nutmeg, cloves, and cinnamon that fetched fortunes in European markets, and the fierce competition for control of the spice trade. But a dispute with King Manuel I over a matter of honor changed his fate. Disillusioned and determined, Magellan renounced his allegiance to Portugal and turned to Spain, where he found a willing patron in the young King Charles I. In 1518, Magellan stood before the Spanish court, his weathered face a testament to years at sea. His plan was audacious: to find a westward route to the Spice Islands, circumventing the Portuguese monopoly on the Eastern Passage. The king, eager to outmaneuver his rival, granted Magellan a fleet of 5 ships and a crew of over 200 men. The vessels, Trinidad, San Antonio, Concepcion, Victoria, and Santiago, were sturdy but worn, their hulls groaning under the weight of salted meat, hardtack, wine, and tools for trade and warfare. Magellan's vision was clear, but the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. The journey begins. On September 20th, 1519, the fleet set sail from Seville, their banners fluttering in the wind like the wings of seabirds. They crossed the Atlantic, reaching the sun-scorched coast of Brazil in December. From there, they sailed south, their eyes scanning the horizon for a passage to the Pacific. They explored the Rio de la Plata, its muddy waters stretching inland, but it proved a dead end. As winter gripped the southern latitudes, the crew grew restless, their murmurs of discontent rising with the cold. In April 1520, a mutiny erupted on 3 of the ships, led by captains who doubted Magellan's leadership. "We'll die in these frozen wastes," one shouted, his voice echoing across the decks. With swift and ruthless action, Magellan quelled the rebellion, executing the ringleaders and marooning others on the desolate shore, their fate sealed by the howling wind. The fleet pressed on, venturing further south through storms that lashed the sails and waves that threatened to swallow them whole. On October 21st, 1520, they sighted a narrow channel cutting through the land, a jagged scar at the edge of the world. This was the entrance to the strait that would bear Magellan's name. For 38 days, they navigated its treacherous waters, their ships threading through a labyrinth of fjords and cliffs, the air thick with the scent of ice and salt. The Santiago succumbed to the fury of the sea, its wreckage a grim warning, but the remaining four vessels emerged into the vast Pacific Ocean. The crew stood in silence, awestruck by the endless horizon that stretched before them. Across the endless sea. The Pacific, despite its name, was a merciless expanse. For 98 days, the fleet sailed across its boundless waters, their supplies dwindling to crumbs, their bodies ravaged by scurvy. Teeth loosened, gums bled, and men grew weak, their skins sallow under the relentless sun. They ate sawdust and gnawed on leather strips, their water barrels fouled with slime. "We'll never see land again," a sailor whispered, his voice trembling with despair. Yet Magellan's resolve burned brighter than ever, his eyes fixed on the promise of the East. On March 6th, 1521, they reached the island of Guam, its green hills a fleeting salvation. The crew traded trinkets for fruit and water, their spirits briefly lifted. 10 days later, they arrived in the Philippines, a land of lush islands, shimmering seas, and natives who greeted them with cautious curiosity. Magellan, driven by faith as much as ambition, sought to convert the local chieftains to Christianity. He saw himself as a harbinger of God's will, his mission extending beyond trade to the salvation of souls. But his zeal ignited conflict. On April 27th, 1521, he waded into battle on the island of Mactan, his armor glinting in the tropical sun. Facing the warriors of Chief Lapu-Lapu, he was outnumbered and overconfident. A spear pierced his leg, then another his chest, and Magellan fell, his blood staining the sand. His body was left behind, a sacrifice to his own hubris. The crew mourned their captain, but the journey was far from over. The voyage completed. Juan Sebastian Elcano, a Basque navigator with a steady hand, took command. With only 2 ships remaining, the Trinidad too damaged to continue, they set sail across the Indian Ocean, their holds laden with spices and their hearts heavy with loss. They rounded the Cape of Good Hope, battling currents and storms that tested their will. On September 6th, 1522, the Victoria, battered but triumphant, limped into Seville's harbor. Only 18 of the original crew stepped ashore, their faces gaunt, their cargo of cloves worth a king's ransom. They had completed the first circumnavigation of the globe, a feat born of Magellan's dream and Elcano's determination. Magellan's expedition rewrote the map of the world. It proved the Earth's sphericity, opened new trade routes, and expanded European horizons. But it came at a cost. The voyage marked the dawn of colonization in Asia and the Americas, bringing wealth to Europe and devastation to indigenous peoples. Magellan's legacy is a tapestry of triumph and tragedy, woven with threads of courage, curiosity, and the shadows of conquest. His name endures, a beacon for explorers, a question for historians. What drives a man to sail into the abyss, and what is the price of proving the world is round? James Cook, the cartographer of the Pacific. In the mid 18th century, as Europe basked in the glow of the Enlightenment, a quiet man from Yorkshire was preparing to redraw the map of the world. James Cook, a farmer's son turned naval officer, possessed a rare blend of curiosity, precision, and courage. His voyages would not only chart unknown waters, but also bridge cultures, expand scientific knowledge, and leave a legacy that endures to this day. This is the story of Captain James Cook, the explorer who ventured into the vast Pacific where no European had gone before. A humble beginning. James Cook was born in 1728 in Marton, a small village in Yorkshire, England. His father was a farm laborer, and young James seemed destined for a life of toil. But fate had other plans. At 17, he apprenticed with a shipowner in Whitby, where he learned the art of navigation and seamanship. The sea became his classroom, its lessons etched into his bones with every swell and storm. By 1755, Cook had joined the Royal Navy, his skills quickly earning him a reputation as a gifted cartographer. During the 7 Years' War, he mapped the treacherous waters of the St. Lawrence River. Lawrence River, enabling the British to capture Quebec. His charts were so precise that they were used for decades. But it was in 1768 that Cook's life took a pivotal turn. The Royal Society, eager to observe the transit of Venus, a rare astronomical event, commissioned an expedition to the South Pacific. Cook, now a lieutenant, was chosen to lead it. With a crew of 94 men and a ship named Endeavour, he set sail on a journey that would change history. The first voyage, a world unveiled. On August 26th, 1768, the Endeavour slipped out of Plymouth Harbor, its sails catching the wind like a bird taking flight. Cook's mission was twofold: to observe the transit of Venus from Tahiti and to search for the mythical southern continent, Terra Australis. The voyage was a marvel of endurance and discovery. After rounding Cape Horn, they reached Tahiti in April 1769, where they spent 3 months observing the stars and engaging with the island's people. Cook's respect for the Tahitians was evident. He ordered his crew to treat them with kindness, a rare gesture in an age of conquest. From Tahiti, Cook sailed south, charting the coasts of New Zealand and Australia. He was the first European to map the eastern seaboard of Australia, claiming it for Britain and naming it New South Wales. Along the way, he encountered the Great Barrier Reef, its coral teeth nearly claiming the Endeavour in a harrowing scrape. But Cook's steady hand and quick thinking saved the ship, a testament to his leadership. The voyage was a triumph, not just for its discoveries, but for the wealth of scientific knowledge it brought back. Botanical specimens, astronomical data, and ethnographic observations. The second voyage, chasing the southern continent. In 1772, Cook embarked on his second voyage, this time with 2 ships, the Resolution and the Adventure. His mission was clear: to find Terra Australis or prove it did not exist. The journey took him into the icy embrace of the Antarctic Circle, where towering icebergs loomed like silent sentinels. The crew battled freezing winds and treacherous seas, their breath frosting in the air. The cold is so intense that it numbs the very soul, Cook wrote in his journal. Yet they pressed on, their determination a flame against the chill. Cook's ships circled the globe, crossing the Antarctic Circle 3 times, a feat no one had achieved before. They discovered new islands, including South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands, but the fabled southern continent remained elusive. In January 1773, they reached the Antarctic ice pack, a wall of white that barred their path. Cook knew he could go no further. The risk is too great, he conceded, turning back. Though he did not find Terra Australis, his voyage dispelled the myth, proving that if such a land existed, it was locked in ice and uninhabitable. The third voyage, a tragic end. Cook's third and final voyage began in 1776 with a new quest to find the Northwest Passage, a fabled sea route through the Arctic that would connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. With the Resolution and the Discovery, he sailed north, charting the coasts of North America and venturing into the Bering Strait. The ice was a formidable foe, its frozen grip yielding. The sea is a sheet of glass, impenetrable, Cook noted, his frustration palpable. In 1778, the expedition reached the Hawaiian Islands, which Cook named the Sandwich Islands in honor of his patron, the Earl of Sandwich. The islanders greeted them with awe, believing Cook to be the god Lono, returned as prophecy foretold. But tensions simmered beneath the surface. A dispute over a stolen boat escalated into violence, and on February 14th, 1779, Cook was killed on the shores of Kealakekwa Bay. His death was a shock to the world, a tragic end to a life of exploration. A legacy written in the stars. James Cook's voyages were a triumph of human curiosity and resilience. He charted more of the Earth's surface than any explorer before him, his maps a testament to his precision and skill. His encounters with indigenous peoples, though not without conflict, were marked by a respect that was rare for his time. He brought back a treasure trove of knowledge, botanical specimens that would revolutionize science, astronomical data that refined navigation, and cultural insights that challenged European assumptions. Yet Cook's legacy is not without shadows. His voyages paved the way for colonization, bringing disease and disruption to the Pacific's indigenous cultures. His story is a reminder that exploration, for all its glory, carries a cost. As the sun sets over the Pacific, casting a golden glow on the waves, we are left to ponder the man who dared to sail into the unknown. What drove him to the ends of the earth? And what lessons can we learn from his relentless pursuit of discovery? David Livingstone, the Scottish missionary who mapped Africa's heart. In the mid-19th century, as Europe basked in the glow of the Industrial Revolution, a quiet man from Scotland was preparing to venture into the unknown depths of Africa. David Livingstone, a devout Christian and trained doctor, was driven by a dual purpose: to spread the gospel and to end the brutal slave trade that ravaged the continent. His name would become synonymous with exploration, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. This is the story of Livingstone's extraordinary journey, a tale of courage, hardship, and the unyielding belief that one man could change the world. A humble beginning. David Livingstone was born in 1813 in Blantyre, Scotland, into a life of poverty. The son of a tea salesman, he worked long hours in a cotton mill from the age of 10, his small hands feeding the machines that powered Britain's industrial might. But Livingstone's spirit was not confined to the factory floor. By candlelight, he studied Latin and theology, his mind alight with dreams of a greater purpose. At 23, he enrolled in medical school, determined to become a missionary doctor. His inspiration came from the stories of explorers like Mungo Park, who adventured into Africa's interior, and from the writings of abolitionists who decried the horrors of slavery. Livingstone saw Africa as a land of both mystery and suffering, a place where he could heal bodies and souls alike. In 1841, he set sail for the continent, his heart filled with hope and his mind with visions of a better future, into the unknown. Livingstone's first expedition took him to the Cape Colony in South Africa, where he joined the London Missionary Society. He quickly distinguished himself with his compassion for the local tribes and his disdain for the racial prejudices of the colonial settlers. He learned the languages of the people, treated their illnesses, and preached a gospel of love and equality. But Livingstone was not content to stay in one place. The vast, uncharted interior beckoned, its secrets hidden behind veils of jungle and desert. In 1849, he embarked on his first major journey, crossing the Kalahari Desert, a sun-scorched wasteland where water was more precious than gold. With a small team of African guides, he braved the heat and the thirst, his eyes scanning the horizon for the fabled Lake Ngami. When they finally reached its shimmering shores, Livingstone's heart swelled with triumph. It was the first of many discoveries that would redefine the map of Africa, the Zambezi and Victoria Falls. Livingstone's most famous expedition began in 1852 when he set out to explore the Zambezi River, a mighty waterway that snaked through the heart of the continent. His goal was audacious: to find a navigable route from the interior to the coast, a God's highway that could bring commerce and Christianity to Africa's people. With a small band of loyal Makololo tribesmen, he trekked through dense jungles and across roaring rapids, his body racked by malaria and his supplies dwindling. Then, on November 16th, 1855, he beheld a sight that would etch his name into history. Before him roared a waterfall of such grandeur that it seemed to shake the earth itself. The locals called it Mosi Oatunya, the smoke that thunders. Livingstone, awestruck, renamed it Victoria Falls in honor of his queen. Scenes so lovely must have been gazed upon by angels in their flight, he wrote, his pen trembling with reverence. It was a moment of pure wonder, a glimpse into the divine beauty of the untamed world, a crusade against slavery. But Livingstone's journey was not just one of discovery, it was a crusade. The slave trade, fueled by Arab and Portuguese merchants, was a blight on the land. Livingstone witnessed its horrors firsthand: villages burned, families torn apart, and countless souls shackled in chains. His blood boiled with righteous fury. If my disclosures regarding the terrible Ujijian slavery should lead to its suppression, he declared, I shall regard that as a greater matter by far than the discovery of all the sources of the Nile. He wrote letters to Britain, pleading for action, his words a clarion call against the inhumanity he saw. He believed that by opening Africa to legitimate trade, cotton, ivory, and beeswax, he could undermine the economic roots of slavery. His vision was bold, but the forces arrayed against him were formidable. Slave traders, fearing the loss of their profits, spread rumors of his death, hoping to silence his voice. Yet Livingstone pressed on, his resolve unshaken. The final journey. In 1866, Livingstone embarked on his last and most perilous expedition to find the source of the Nile, the holy grail of African exploration. He vanished into the wilderness, his letters growing scarce, his fate unknown. For years the world held its breath, wondering if the great explorer had met his end. Then, in 1871, a young American journalist named Henry Morton Stanley set out to find him. After months of searching, Stanley uttered the famous words, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?" Livingstone, gaunt and feverish, greeted him with a weary smile. He was a shadow of his former self, his body ravaged by disease and his supplies exhausted. Yet his spirit burned bright. He refused to leave Africa, determined to complete his mission. "I am going on," he insisted, "to see the source of the Nile." But time was not on his side. On May 1st, 1873, his loyal companions found him kneeling by his bed, his head bowed in prayer. He had passed into legend, a legacy written in compassion. David Livingstone's life was a testament to the power of one man's vision. His maps opened Africa to the world, his writings inspired a generation of explorers, and his crusade against slavery laid the groundwork for its eventual abolition. But his greatest legacy was not in the lands he charted or the rivers he traced. It was in the hearts he touched. He saw Africa not as a land to be conquered, but as a place of beauty and potential, its people deserving of dignity and freedom. As the African sun sets, casting a golden glow over the savannah, we are left to ponder the man who dared to walk where no one had gone before. What drove him to the ends of the earth? And what lessons can we learn from his relentless pursuit of a better world? Roald Amundsen, the Norwegian explorer who conquered the poles. In the early 20th century, as the world stood on the brink of modernity, one man's name became synonymous with the spirit of exploration. Roald Amundsen, a Norwegian adventurer, was a figure of relentless determination and icy resolve. His expeditions to the Arctic and Antarctic regions would etch his name into the annals of history, not just as an explorer, but as a pioneer who dared to venture where no one had gone before. This is the story of Amundsen's extraordinary journey, a tale of courage, strategy, and the unyielding pursuit of the unknown. But how did a boy from a small Norwegian town become the first to reach the South Pole? And what drove him to risk everything in the frozen wastelands of the world? A childhood forged in ice. Roald Amundsen was born in 1872 in Borge, Norway, into a family of shipowners and sea captains. From a young age, the call of the sea was in his blood, but it was the tales of polar explorers like Fridtjof Nansen that ignited his imagination. As a boy, he would ski across the frozen fjords, his breath frosting in the air, dreaming of the day he would lead his own expeditions. His mother, however, had other plans, urging him to study medicine, but the pull of adventure was too strong. At 21, upon his mother's death, Amundsen abandoned his studies and set his sights on the poles. He began his career as a sailor, learning the arts of navigation and survival. But it was his first major expedition, the Belgian Antarctic expedition of 1897 to 1899, that tested his mettle. The ship became trapped in the ice, and the crew faced a brutal winter. Amundsen's resilience and leadership shone through, earning him respect and a taste for the challenges of the frozen South. The Northwest Passage, a Test of Endurance. In 1903, Amundsen set his sights on a feat that had eluded explorers for centuries: the Northwest Passage, a sea route through the Arctic connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. With a small crew of 6 men and a modest ship, the Gua, he embarked on a journey that would span 3 years. The passage was a labyrinth of ice-choked channels and treacherous waters, but Amundsen was undeterred. He spent winters learning from the Inuit, adopting their techniques for survival: dog sledding, fur clothing, and igloo building. In 1906, after navigating through the icy maze, the Gua emerged into the Pacific. Amundsen had done the impossible. He was the first to successfully traverse the Northwest Passage. The world took notice, but for Amundsen, it was merely the beginning. His eyes were already fixed on a greater prize: the South Pole, the race to the South Pole. In 1910, Amundsen announced his intention to conquer the North Pole, but secretly he had set his sights on the Antarctic. The race was on, for British explorer Robert Falcon Scott was also preparing an expedition to the South Pole. Amundsen knew that victory would require not just courage, but strategy. He chose a different route, one untested, but potentially faster. He also relied on dogs, not ponies, to pull his sledges, a decision that would prove crucial. On October 19th, 1911, Amundsen and his team of 4 men, along with 52 dogs, set out from their base at the Bay of Whales. The Antarctic was a frozen hellscape where temperatures plunged to minus 40 degrees Celsius and blizzards could bury a man in minutes. But Amundsen was prepared. He had studied the Inuits' methods, and his team was a well-oiled machine, each man an expert in his role. The journey was grueling. They climbed the Axel Heiberg Glacier, a wall of ice that tested their strength and will. But on December 14th, 1911, after 54 days of relentless effort, they reached the South Pole. Amundsen planted the Norwegian flag in the snow, his breath frosting in the air as he gazed at the endless white horizon. "We have reached the goal," he wrote in his diary, his words simple but profound. Just 35 days later, Scott would arrive, only to find Amundsen's flag fluttering in the wind. The hero's return and the final frontier. Amundsen returned to Norway a hero, his name celebrated across the globe. But the call of the ice was not silenced. In 1926, he turned his gaze to the North Pole, this time by air. With Italian engineer Umberto Nobile, he flew over the Arctic in the airship Norge, becoming one of the first to reach the North Pole by flight. It was a triumph, but it would be his last great adventure. In 1928, when Nobile's airship crashed in the Arctic, Amundsen joined the rescue mission. He boarded a seaplane and vanished into the frozen north, his fate a mystery. His body was never found, but his legacy was sealed. He had conquered both poles, charted new paths through the ice, and inspired generations of explorers. As the Arctic winds howl and the snow falls softly on the tundra, we are left to ponder the man who dared to walk where no one had gone before. What drove him to the ends of the earth? And what lessons can we learn from his relentless pursuit of the unknown? Amelia Earhart, the aviator who defied the skies. In the early 20th century, as the world marveled at the dawn of aviation, one woman dared to soar higher than most could dream. Her name was Amelia Earhart, an American aviator whose courage, determination, and passion for flight would make her a legend. She shattered records, challenged societal norms, and inspired generations of women to pursue their dreams. Yet her story is also one of mystery, a tale that ends not with a triumphant landing, but with a disappearance that has puzzled the world for decades. How did a young girl from Kansas become one of history's most iconic explorers? And what secrets lie hidden in the vast Pacific, where her journey came to an abrupt and tragic end? A childhood of curiosity. Amelia Mary Earhart was born on July 24th, 1897, in Atchison, Kansas, into a family that encouraged her adventurous spirit. From a young age, she was a tomboy, climbing trees, hunting rats with a rifle, and dreaming of a life beyond the quiet plains of her hometown. Her first encounter with an airplane came at the age of 10 during a visit to the Iowa State Fair. The rickety biplane, she later recalled, was a thing of rusty wire and wood, and it sparked little interest at the time. But the seed was planted waiting for the right moment to bloom. That moment came in 1920 when Amelia attended an air show in California. As a stunt plane roared overhead, she felt a surge of excitement, a call to the skies that she could not ignore. Just days later, she took her first flying lesson, her hands gripping the controls with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. As soon as I left the ground, she said, I knew I myself had to fly. Within 6 months, she had saved enough money to buy her own plane, a bright yellow Kinner Airster she lovingly named the Canary. With it, she began to chase her dreams, one flight at a time, breaking barriers and setting records. Amelia's passion for aviation quickly turned into a quest to break boundaries. In 1928, she became the first woman to cross the Atlantic Ocean by air, flying as a passenger aboard the Friendship. Though she humbly described herself as just baggage on that flight, the world took notice. She was hailed as a heroine, her name splashed across headlines, her face a symbol of the new era of flight. But Amelia was not content to be a passenger in her own story. In 1932, she set out to achieve what no woman had done before, to fly solo across the Atlantic. On May 20th, she lifted off from Newfoundland in her red Lockheed Vega, her heart pounding as she faced the vast, unforgiving ocean alone. The journey was perilous. Ice formed on her wings, fog obscured her vision, and a broken altimeter left her guessing her altitude. Yet after 14 hours and 56 minutes, she touched down in a pasture in Northern Ireland, her plane's wheels sinking into the soft earth. She had done it. The world erupted in celebration, and Amelia Earhart became a household name. Her achievements did not stop there. In 1935, she became the first person to fly solo from Honolulu to California, a treacherous 2,400-mile journey over the Pacific. She set speed records, crossed continents, and even became the first woman to receive the Distinguished Flying Cross. But for Amelia, these were not just feats of aviation. They were steps toward a greater goal, to prove that women could excel in fields dominated by men. Women must try to do things as men have tried, she once said. When they fail, their failure must be but a challenge to others. The final flight, a dream deferred. In 1937, Amelia set her sights on her most ambitious goal yet, to fly around the world, a feat only a handful of men had attempted. She called it her last big flight, a 29,000-mile journey that would take her across 4 continents and over the equator twice. With her navigator, Fred Noonan, she lifted off from Miami on June 1st, 1937, in her silver Lockheed Electra, its twin engines roaring with promise. The early legs of the journey were a triumph. They crossed the Atlantic, traversed Africa, and soared over the deserts of the Middle East. By July, they had reached Lae, New Guinea, with only the Pacific Ocean standing between them and home. But the final stretch, from Lae to Howland Island, a tiny speck in the vast Pacific, was the most dangerous. The island was just 1.5 miles long, a needle in a haystack of blue. On July 2nd, 1937, Amelia and Fred took off from Lae, their plane heavy with fuel. As they flew into the night, radio operators along the route listened for their signals. But as the hours passed, Amelia's voice grew faint, her messages fragmented. "We are running north and south," she radioed, her tone urgent. Then silence. The world held its breath as search efforts scoured the ocean, but no trace of the Electra or its crew was found. Amelia Earhart, the woman who had conquered the skies, had vanished, a legacy that soars beyond the horizon. Amelia Earhart's disappearance remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Theories abound. Some say she crashed into the sea. Others believe she was captured by the Japanese, and a few whisper that she lived out her days in anonymity. But the truth, like Amelia herself, remains elusive. What is certain is her enduring legacy. She was more than a pilot. She was a trailblazer, a feminist icon, and a symbol of the boundless human spirit. Her life inspired countless women to pursue careers in aviation, science, and beyond. She once said, "The most effective way to do it is to do it," a mantra that echoed in the hearts of those who dared to dream. Today, her name graces airports, scholarships, and even a crater on the moon. But perhaps her greatest legacy is the mystery she left behind, a reminder that the skies, like life itself, are full of questions without easy answers. As the sun sets over the Pacific, casting a golden glow on the waves, we are left to wonder, what became of Amelia Earhart? Did she find the horizon she so tirelessly chased? The answers may be lost to time, but her spirit, soaring, fearless, and free, continues to inspire us to reach for the skies. Neil Armstrong, the astronaut who walked on the moon. In the mid-20th century, as the world stood on the brink of a new era, a quiet man from Ohio was preparing to take a step that would echo through history. Neil Armstrong, an American astronaut, was a figure of calm determination and unyielding courage. His journey to the moon would not only fulfill a dream shared by humanity for centuries, but also mark a triumph of human ingenuity and spirit. This is the story of Armstrong's extraordinary voyage, a tale of ambition, teamwork, and the relentless pursuit of the unknown. But how did a small-town boy become the first person to set foot on another world? And what secrets lie hidden in the shadows of that historic moment? A childhood of wonder. Neil Alden Armstrong was born on August 5th, 1930, in Wapakoneta, Ohio, into a family that nurtured his curiosity. From a young age, he was fascinated by the skies, building model airplanes, gazing at the stars, and dreaming of flight. At just 16, he earned his pilot's license before he even had a driver's license, his passion for aviation already a guiding star. He once said, "I was thrilled by the idea of flying things," a sentiment that would shape his destiny. Armstrong's journey to the stars began with a solid foundation. He studied aeronautical engineering at Purdue University, his mind sharpened by the rigors of science and mathematics. But it was his service as a naval aviator during the Korean War that tested his mettle. Flying 78 combat missions, he learned the art of precision and the value of calm under pressure, skills that would prove invaluable in the years to come. The space race, a global stage. In the 1960s, the world was gripped by the Cold War, a time of tension and competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. The space race became a battleground of ideology and innovation, with each nation striving to outdo the other. The Soviets had already claimed the first satellite, the first man in space, and the first spacewalk. America needed a victory, and President John F. Kennedy set the audacious goal to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade's end. Armstrong, now a test pilot, joined NASA's astronaut program in 1962. His first spaceflight came in 1966 aboard Gemini 8, where he performed the first successful docking of two spacecraft, a feat that nearly ended in disaster when a thruster malfunction sent the capsule spinning. With nerves of steel, Armstrong regained control, proving his ability to think clearly in the face of danger. It was this composure that would earn him the commander's seat on Apollo 11, the mission that would change the world. The Apollo 11 mission, a leap for mankind. On July 16, 1969, the world held its breath as Apollo 11 lifted off from Kennedy Space Center. Armstrong, along with astronauts Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins, embarked on a journey that would take them 240,000 miles from home. The Saturn V rocket, a marvel of engineering, roared into the sky, its flames a beacon of human ambition. For 4 days, they traveled through the void, their eyes fixed on the pale, distant moon. The challenges were immense. The lunar module, Eagle, was a fragile craft, its walls as thin as tinfoil. As Armstrong and Aldrin descended to the lunar surface, alarms blared, so fuel was running low, and the landing site was strewn with boulders. With only seconds to spare, Armstrong manually piloted the Eagle to a safe spot, his heart pounding, but his hands steady. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed," he radioed, his voice calm, betraying none of the tension that had gripped the cabin. Then, on July 20th, 1969, at 10:56 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Neil Armstrong stepped off the ladder and onto the moon's surface. His words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," resonated across the globe, a testament to human achievement. For 21 hours, Armstrong and Aldrin explored the lunar landscape, collecting samples, planting the American flag, and marveling at the Earth, a blue and white marble suspended in the blackness of space. The return and the weight of history. The return to Earth was a triumph, but it was also a moment of reflection. Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on July 24th, greeted by cheers and a hero's welcome. Yet for Armstrong, the weight of history was a heavy burden. He was a reluctant celebrity, a man who preferred the quiet of the cockpit to the glare of the spotlight. "I am and ever will be a White Sox pocket protector, nerdy engineer," he once quipped, his humility a stark contrast to his monumental achievement. In the years that followed, Armstrong retreated from public life, teaching aerospace engineering and living a quiet life in Ohio. He rarely spoke of his time on the moon, preferring to let the accomplishment speak for itself. But his legacy was undeniable. He had opened the door to the stars, proving that humanity's reach could extend beyond the bounds of Earth. His journey inspired generations of scientists, engineers, and dreamers, a reminder that with courage and ingenuity, the impossible could become reality. A legacy that shines like the stars. Neil Armstrong's life was a testament to the power of human curiosity and determination. His journey from a small town boy to the first man on the moon is a story of ambition, resilience, and the unyielding belief that the sky is not the limit. It is just the beginning. As we gaze at the moon, its pale light a beacon in the night, we are left to ponder the man who dared to walk where no one had gone before. What drove him to reach for the stars? And what lessons can we learn from his quiet courage? The story of Neil Armstrong is not just one of exploration. It is a tale of humanity's boundless potential. His words, spoken from the lunar surface, continue to echo through time, a call to adventure and a reminder that the greatest journeys are those that take us beyond ourselves. Sacagawea, the Shoshone woman, imagine a world of endless horizons where rugged mountains pierce the sky and rivers carve paths through untamed wilderness. This is the land of the Shoshone, a nomadic people who roamed the American West long before maps claimed it. Among them, around 1788, in what we now call Idaho, a girl was born. Her name was Sacagawea. Her story begins quietly, in a cradle of nature's embrace, but it will soon unfold into a tale of courage, survival, and a journey that changed the course of history. Who was this young woman, and how did she rise from the shadows of her tribe to stand at the heart of one of America's greatest adventures? Let's step back in time and find out. A life interrupted. Sacagawea's early years were woven into the fabric of Shoshone life, hunting, gathering, and moving with the seasons. But peace was fragile in this vast land. At just 12 years old, her world shattered. A rival tribe, the Hidatsa, swept through her village, and Sacagawea was torn from her family, carried far from the mountains she knew. Her fate twisted again when she was sold to a French-Canadian trapper named Toussaint Charbonneau, a man who would become her husband. Life could have ended there, in obscurity, but destiny had other plans. What could a teenage girl, bound by circumstance, possibly offer to a nation on the brink of discovery? An unexpected call. In 1704, two men, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, set out on a mission that would define an era. Commissioned by President Thomas Jefferson, they aimed to chart the unknown expanses of the Louisiana Territory and find a path to the Pacific Ocean. They needed help, interpreters, guides, anyone who could bridge the gap between their small party and the vast wilderness ahead. Enter Toussaint Charbonneau, hired for his knowledge of the land and languages. But it wasn't just him who joined the expedition. Sacagawea, now 16 and pregnant, stepped into the story. Why would they bring her along? The answer lies in the secrets she carried. Secrets of language, land, and survival. A voice in the wilderness. The journey began. A grueling trek through uncharted territory. Sacagawea, cradling her newborn son Jean-Baptiste on her back, became more than a companion. She became a cornerstone. Her knowledge of the Shoshone language opened doors with tribes they met, turning potential enemies into allies. Picture this: a tense meeting with a native group, weapons at the ready, until Sacagawea steps forward, her words weaving peace where conflict loomed. Her presence alone spoke volumes. Women and children didn't travel with war parties, signaling the expedition's peaceful intent. But could she do more than translate? The wilderness would soon test her in ways no one expected. A hero in the storm. The expedition faced relentless challenges: raging rivers, towering mountains, and the ever present threat of starvation. One day, disaster struck. A boat capsized in the Missouri River, spilling precious supplies into the churning water. While others panicked, Sacagawea acted. With calm precision, she rescued journals, instruments, and medicines, items vital to the mission's success. Lewis and Clark marveled at her composure, her quiet strength shining through the chaos. She didn't stop there. When food ran low, she gathered roots and berries, her knowledge of the land keeping hunger at bay. How could one woman hold so much power in such a perilous journey? The mountains call her home. As the expedition pushed westward, the Rocky Mountains loomed ahead, a barrier that could break them. They needed horses, and they needed help. Then, a moment of fate. Sacagawea recognized the landscape. These were the lands of her childhood, the home of her Shoshone people. She guided the party to her tribe, and in an astonishing twist, she found herself face to face with her brother, now a chief. Tears fell, but so did opportunity. Through her, the expedition secured the horses they needed to cross the mountains. Was this reunion chance, or was Sacagawea always meant to lead them here? Triumph over the unknown. The journey was far from over. Grizzly bears prowled, rattlesnakes struck, and winter bit deep into their bones. Yet Sacagawea endured, her infant son a constant reminder of life amid hardship. Finally, after months of struggle, they reached the Pacific Ocean, a sight few had seen, a triumph few could claim. Sacagawea stood on that shore, her footprints mingling with the waves, a testament to her unyielding spirit. What did she feel, gazing at that endless water, knowing she'd helped conquer the impossible, a legacy etched in time? Sacagawea's story doesn't end with the expedition's return. She faded back into history's shadows, her later years a mystery, but her impact echoes still. She became a symbol of women's strength, of Native American resilience, of the unsung heroes who shaped a nation. Her name graces statues, coins, and rivers, a reminder of the young Shoshone woman who bridged worlds. Without her, would Lewis and Clark have succeeded? Her legacy challenges us to see the past through new eyes, to honor those whose voices were too long unheard. And so, dear listener, we reach the end, not just of Sacagawea's tale, but of our journey through history's bravest souls. From icy tundras to sun-scorched deserts, we've walked with explorers who dared to dream beyond the horizon. Their stories of courage, of curiosity, light the way for us all. What secrets lie in the chapters of your own life, waiting to be uncovered? As this series closes, we thank you for sharing this adventure with us, for sheer night after night. Now, as the stars rise and the world quiets, let these tales cradle you into rest. May your dreams be filled with the wonders we've explored together, the rush of rivers, the whisper of the wind through ancient lands. Good night, dear friend. Sleep well, and may your own journey through life be as bold and boundless as those who came before.